Hello everyone. This is the 10th part of the story, Magical Journey in Harry Potter World. Chapter 37, Blood Magic, and Successful Entry. In a small room with a sizable wooden table, a single chair, and a single shelf bookcase hanging from the wall as decor, sat the sole resident of the room going through numerous books and tomes. The walls of the room were colored a dark red, giving it a unique look. If another person saw the room's color, it would slightly disturb them as it resembled the color of blood. The resident didn't seem to mind it as he was the one who gave the room its blood-red color. The single-shelf bookcase on the wall was completely empty as its contents were on the table, books and texts spread open haphazardly, overlapping each other, sitting side by side in a manner that made it difficult to track down a book. But the resident of the room could see the order in the chaos as he was the one who set them in the seemingly random manner. The room was the room of requirement, transformed into a room with knowledge on blood magic, and the room gave a single table, chair, and small shelf with books related to blood magic. Every book from the room was branded with a sigil in the shape of a stylish script reading ROR, showing the book's ownership belonged to the room of requirements. The one who called for the room's services and its sole resident was our very own Quinn West, who wanted to learn more about blood magic. Blood magic was categorized as dark magic in Britain and many other countries by their respective ministries and, as such, banned from use. Quinn, of course, ignored all that. He was cautious and took all safety measures before practicing blood magic that affected blood, a person's lifeline. Blood magic, also known as blood sorcery or hemomancy or hematokinesis. The magic of blood manipulation, a dangerous form of magic, this mystical theurgy is used to cast spells, enchantments, and even curses through blood itself, the very bodily fluid which is the potent force as the essence of life that keeps most living beings alive. Well, currently, I don't want to perform curses and spells with my blood as the medium, said Quinn as he rolled up the sleeve of his left hand. I just need to maintain a certain temperature, murmured Quinn, trailing at the end as he saw the veins and arteries in his forearm glow a shallow red before the red glow subsided, leaving his forearm warmer than the rest of his body. Quinn exhaled, feeling the warmth from the small amount of warm blood traveling up his arm, mixing with the rest of his blood, and within seconds his body temperature was back to normal, with no extra warmth remaining. Quinn opened his eyes and stared straight ahead. I need to maintain this for the entire time I am around the icy vault. Quinn put an arm on his heart, licking his lip in nervousness as when the time came, instead of his arms, he needed his heart to be the source of the blood magic. His heart would pump the enchanted blood throughout his body, maintaining the temperature of his body, protecting him from the cruel nature of the death cold. Quinn waved his hand, and the table moved away from him, setting itself against the wall. He stood up from his bar stool, removed his robes, unfastened his necktie, and unbuttoned his shirt, leaving him with only a cotton vest. Quinn took a deep breath and opened and closed his hands before channeling his magic into his blood, targeting the blood in his forearms. The magic reacted, and his veins and arteries glowed in a shallow red. Quinn closed his eyes and took in deep breaths, carefully controlling the magic. Blood was an integral part of a human's body, and any mistake would cause extensive damage to Quinn's body. He didn't want to go to the hospital wing and explain what he was doing with blood magic, and he couldn't even lie about the cause as the damage would be too obvious. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Baby steps, repeated Quinn as he increased the target area of blood enchantment, extending the magic from the tips of his fingers up his forearm. By the end of the day, both his arms' veins and arteries were illuminated in a shallow red glow. Quinn smiled in fascination as he slowly moved his arms, raising them to his eye level, turning them to observe the visible network of surface veins and deep-seated arteries. Time to check if I can cast magic with blood enchantments activated, said Quinn as he stretched his arm forward, palm facing up. With a crack and buzz, whitish-blue currents of lightning appeared throughout his forearm, crawling around his arm like snakes made from lightning. Voiced Quinn, satisfied with the result. If he touched someone, then they would be met with a jolt of electricity akin to a supercharged stun gun coursing through their body. With another breath, Quinn cancelled the magic. The glow of the enchanted blood subsided, leaving a sweaty Quinn with his vest sticking to him. Grunted Quinn as he pulled the vest off his torso and immediately casted magic to clean his body and insta-dry his clothes. Much better, sighed Quinn. This wouldn't happen in the icy vault, but here in the room of requirement, where the temperature wasn't below freezing point, Quinn was sweating like crazy and was on his way to be dehydrated. Maybe I should practice in the icy corridor, considered Quinn as he put his clothes back on, ready to head out for the day. He gathered the books he had bought from his own collection and put the Room of Requirements book back on the shelf. Quinn had found out early that the books marked with the sigil of ROR couldn't be taken and had to be left behind. The books could be copied with a replication charm, Geminio, but the originals stayed in the room. Quinn was working on a project on the side, trying to create a device that would help him copy the books in the Room of Requirements as the replicas made from the replication charm broke down and degraded quickly, usually within a month. Quinn sat in his office chair, doing the last bit of his homework. It was an ordinary day with no business, and he hadn't entertained a single student, but all that changed when he heard the door chime and looked up to find a student with Gryffindor-styled robes entering the AID office. Quinn smiled and greeted the student. "Welcome back, Ms. Dunn." Elora Dunn, a fourth-year student from Gryffindor, nervously smiled as she stepped into the office and silently sat down on the chair set up for the clients. "Have you decided if you want to hire my services?" asked Quinn with a slight smile on his face. This wasn't Elora's first time in the AID office. She consulted with Quinn once before, but because of the nature of the solution Quinn offered her and her own personality, she decided she wanted some time to think before making her decision. She looked at her lap and twiddled her thumbs before giving a short nod. "I see," said Quinn and asked, "Have you brought your trunk with you?" She once again nodded and replied in her tiny voice, "It is outside." "Please bring it in." "I would enchant it in front of you," directed Quinn as he got up from his chair. She nodded and got up from her own chair to bring her trunk inside the office. As she exited the office, Quinn thought back to her request. It was a simple case of someone mishandling her trunk when she was not around. Elora would find her belongings flung around her dorm room at least thrice a week. She had no clue who was doing it, and her roommates refused to the deed. It was a classic case of bullying, and Elora wanted it to stop, so she came to Quinn for help. The solution Quinn gave her was a simple one. "I will enchant your trunk so that if any other than you touches it, then their skin color would change to a color of your choice. The jinx I would place on the trunk would not allow the perpetrator to remove the color from their skin until I want it to disappear. This way, we would be immediately to identify them." But, mumbled Elora. She wasn't sure if she wanted to take the approach. Elora Dunn was the type of person who didn't like confrontation and just wanted the harassment to end. She didn't want to confront her unknown bully. "Ms. Dunn, we know nothing about your bully, so the only way to catch them is to get some proof. So, we have to catch them in the act, but that doesn't seem to be possible as they clearly act when you are out, so the other option is to mark them for later identification," explained Quinn. He had also given her an option that did avoid confrontation. "I can charm your trunk to shock anyone who isn't you. That would inflict enough pain and trauma to keep them away from your stuff." "If that is acceptable," offered Quinn. But, she shut that idea down immediately. So, here they were, on her second visit, Elora deciding to go with the plan to mark her bully. "Okay, I will charm your trunk so that it would change the skin color of anyone other than you, and when you spot them, you can report them to your head of the house," answered Quinn. "But what about if they deny doing it?" asked Elora. Quinn chuckled and replied, "Just as I said, the jinx I am placing is very hard to remove, and I assure you it would stay on their skin." Elora nodded in return. "Okay. Great, now please place your hands on the trunk," asked Quinn, and Elora complied. Quinn took out his fake wand and made up some bogus wand movement. Elora's trunk glowed in white light before the white glow died down. "You can remove your hands," smiled Quinn. Elora looked at the trunk with suspicion, so Quinn asked, "Do you want to see the effects?" Elora nodded hesitantly, and Quinn put his hands on the trunk, and instantly his skin turned the color of mustard. The jinx stained every bit of his skin in a mustard color. Quinn looked at Elora with a mustard-colored face and asked, "It will be something like this. Quite easy to spot, right?" Elora nodded with a stunned expression. Quinn chuckled and removed the mustard color from his skin. He pointed at the trunk and asked, "Please place your hand on the trunk. I have to recast the charm." After recasting the charm, Quinn said goodbye to her as she exited the office. "I hope your bully would leave you alone, Ms. Dunn." He paused before adding, "I hope you would help me out when I come to claim my IOU." Elora looked back towards Quinn to see him with his hands behind his back and a slight smile on his face. She nodded and exited with Quinn smiling as she departed, closing the door behind her. It took 2 days before Quinn saw the results of his nifty jinx on Elora's trunk. Quinn was talking with his friends in the Great Hall, but his eyes caught the sight of Gryffindor girl running into the hall. It made Quinn grin when he saw the mustard color on the girl's skin. Teresa Grant, 6th year, thought Quinn as he recalled the name of the mustard-colored girl. Quinn watched as Teresa Grant ran to Elora with tears streaming down her face. She yelled at Elora, and Elora shrunk back because of the yelling. Thankfully, McGonagall came running to the scene and interrogated Teresa for her loud yelling. Elora, in the panic of confrontation, looked towards the Ravenclaw table. Her eyes met Quinn's. Quinn nodded towards her, and she nodded back, showing determination. Go get girl, thought Quinn as he observed the conversation. Elora told McGonagall her side of the story and how she charmed it so that she could know who was messing with her trunk. McGonagall turned to Teresa and asked her if she was the one who was mishandling Elora's cousin. Teresa buckled under the pressing glare from McGonagall and confessed. When McGonagall asked Elora to undo her charm, the mustard color drained from Teresa's skin with a twitch of Quinn's finger. Task completed, thought Quinn before returning to chatting with his friends. Quinn stood in the icy corridor, facing the icy vault. He was standing just up the steps, stretching his body before walking into the vault region. Let's do this, said Quinn as his breath became visible in the cold. With a deep breath, Quinn began using blood magic. Under his clothes, all of Quinn's veins and arteries in Quinn's chest become visible with a red glow. The left side of Quinn's chest glowed exceptionally red because Quinn's heart glowed up. Ha! Ha! Breathed Quinn as he felt his body warm up in the cold. It's working, spoke Quinn, smiling. With another deep breath, Quinn descended the steps to the icy vault. The moment he stepped down the last stair step, a cold that could kill instantly descended on Quinn. Quinn groaned as he still could feel the harshness of the cold. Groaned Quinn as he stood still on the spot. Quinn felt something and looked down at his hand, seeing his fingers turning blue. Damn it, yelled Quinn as he ascended the steps back to safety. He immediately put his hands on his chest, wanting the heat from his chest to warm his fingers. Quinn stomped on the floor because of the first failure. I have to increase the area, was the observation that Quinn came up with just seconds in the icy vault region. Currently, Quinn was only heating up the blood in the heart region. He hoped his heart would pump the warm blood to all parts of his body, but he was wrong. The heat is leached off too quickly, growled Quinn as he noticed that the warming the blood in his heart and sending it to the rest of his body wasn't enough. Okay, Quinn, you can do this, Quinn spoke to himself, psyching himself up. Quinn hadn't tried to use blood magic on the majority of his body at the same time. He deemed his entire body to be an area too large for his current mastery. But seeing that the limited use wasn't working, Quinn decided to proceed with it. No risk it, no biscuit, quoted Quinn before clapping his hands loudly and jumped up and down to psych himself. He clenched his hands into fists before channeling magic throughout his body. Under his clothes, the red glow of blood magic gradually increased from his chest to his entire torso. His fingertips glowed as the red glow traveled up his arms. And from the soles of his feet, the magic climbed up towards his hips. Quinn craned his neck as the red glow crept up to his jaw, passing through his neck. The capillaries around his eyes also glowed up, and even the eyes' whites were glowing a very faint red. The only part of his body that Quinn left were the regions that were too close to his brain, not wanting to risk any accident to his brain. Yes. I did it. I am the best, celebrated Quinn as he felt blood magic activated throughout his body. He stayed still for a while to stabilize the magic before once again descending into the frozen vault region. Quinn walked into the deadly chill and immediately felt it. It was cold, freezing, but now it was barely tolerable. He still felt chilly, more chilly than he had ever felt, excluding the first time he stepped here. Working like this would be absolutely miserable, complained Quinn as he closed in on the snowflake icicle, his teeth rattling because of the cold. Quinn couldn't increase the temperature of his blood because any more than this and his blood would start boiling, and no one wanted that. The snowflake icicle was a sight to behold. It was beautiful to look at if you could ignore the biting chill. The way it slowly rotated gave it a unique feel of vitality in the frozen area of icy blue. Quinn raised his gloved hand and touched the icicle, but the second the leather glove came in contact with the icicle, it started to freeze, causing Quinn to snatch his hand back. Shit, thought Quinn as he brushed the sudden ice deposit on his glove. Of course, if the area around the gate is so deadly, then this thing attached to it wouldn't be a walk in the park, grumbled Quinn as he raised his now ice-free gloved hand to cast magic on the snowflake to check its composition. A minute in the vault area, Quinn was immersed in studying the flake. 3 minutes, he felt that the cold had increased. 5 minutes in, and Quinn was getting slightly irritated. As 7 minutes came to pass, he was shaking in his clothes, feeling really cold. When the 9th minutes passed, Quinn turned away from the snowflake and rushed back up the stairs, running away from the cold. He gasped for air the second he felt the cold decrease. The red glow of blood magic subsided as Quinn's focus limit reached. Less than 10 minutes is the limit, stuttered Quinn as he heavily breathed. Just under 10 minutes was Quinn's time limit for continuously maintaining blood magic throughout his body. Quinn had plenty of magic to spare. No, he had loads of magic to spare. The problem was Quinn's concentration. He could only concentrate for 10 minutes while working on the icicle, and that too with deteriorating results. It was quite the effort on Quinn's part to keep most of his body's blood warm and make sure that blood stayed warm. Quinn sat down on the floor but immediately stood up because the cold stone stung his bottoms. Ouch, said Quinn as he rubbed his behind. He began pacing the corridor, thinking about what to do next. After thinking about it some time, he concluded. I can't raise the temperature of my body through blood magic, though I can work on my mastery to keep the current temperature, noted Quinn. He could keep the blood magic from deteriorating with this pace. But this isn't enough. I need more, thought Quinn. Quinn's time in the vault region was excessively uncomfortable. He needed to make it more comfortable so that he could work without constantly feeling like a popsicle. I need to increase the surrounding temperature, reasoned Quinn, but it was easier said than done. He did not know how to increase the temperature in the frozen hell. His grasp on fire magic wasn't on the level that would work against that level of cold. Any heat he could produce would be snuffed out in an instant. Quinn closed his eyes and sighed. He opened them to look at the vault. I have to work with what I have. Quinn would slowly work on increasing his efficiency. But right now, he had to work with what he had. Things I do for magic. Quinn cracked his knuckles as the glow from blood magic crept on his body. Chapter 38, Ice, Cold Ice, and More Freezing Ice. The icy vault was as cold as ever, with its icy-blue walls, frosted floors, threatening to kill anyone who dared venture into its freezing, killing, hellish depths. In that freezing environment stood a lone figure, a hand raised to the snowflake icicle. The figure was clad in thick winter clothing, but the exposed parts of skin showed glowing red lines streaking across the skin. The figure looked at the part of the snowflake icicle in front of his raised hand, and suddenly an invisible wave shot towards the icicle, and in one fell swoop, detached a chunk of ice from the icicle, creating the noise of ice being crushed. The figure moved quickly and waved his other hand over the separated piece of ice. The chunk of ice rapidly moved away, gliding away from the place it fell. The figure watched as the moving chunk of ice began fading while slipping on the floor. He turned his head towards the snowflake icicle and saw that the snowflake icicle that a few moments ago was missing a piece was now whole as ever. The figure sighed before walking away from the snowflake icicle towards the steps that separated the frosted hell from a less freezing one. The figure removed his hood and goggles as soon as he crossed the steps and revealed the face of Quinn West, the guy who had been practically living in the icy hell for the past 2 months, suffering in the freezing cold, trying to get rid of the snowflake icicle. Well, for the 100th time, that snowflake sure does regenerate fast, sighed Quinn, breathing out a white plume because of the cold. During Quinn's rage-induced attack with the intent to exterminate the snowflake icicle, he misunderstood that the snowflake icicle was too tough for him to destroy. But it turned out that the snowflake could be damaged, obliterated even, but it regenerated almost instantly. Quinn had not seen this during his attack, and that had cost him a week because Quinn didn't attack the snowflake for the first week, but when he did for some experiment, he saw the instant regeneration. He sat down behind a workstation he had set in the icy corridor and looked at the ivy vault region, thinking about the last 2 months. Every day of the last 2 months, Quinn had spent time on this vault, reading on ice, water, and blood magic. The vault was an extraordinary system of magical mechanisms. It impressed Quinn because it was a mystery to Quinn. He knew about what the icy vault mechanism did, but he still had little idea about how it worked. The air is too dry, almost all the moisture is locked into the snowflake. Quinn had noticed this while observing the vault region. It had opened doors for Quinn in terms of progress. The mechanism in the vault commanded all the natural moisture in the vault. If any moisture, water, or ice was present in the vault region, it would come under the mechanism's control, aiding the recovery of the snowflake in case it was damaged. Quinn had once thrown a bottle of boiling water into the vault region, saw it turn into steam because of the cold, and instantly the steam rushed to the snowflake, adding to its body. Since that day, Quinn didn't dare any water to the vault as it would just help the mechanism guarding the vault. Damaging the snowflake using offensive magic to gain entry to the gate behind the snowflake icicle was out of the way, so Quinn needed another way to reach the gate. After searching for an answer, Quinn finally found a way that might help. To disable the regeneration of the icicle, I need to find a way to first break down the ice while keeping away from the mechanism's control. To do that, I need to break down the ice, gently, so that when the ice detaches itself from the main structure, I would have some form of control over the detached ice. The method to break down the ice gently was Transfiguration and Transmutation. The concepts of these two magics would help Quinn break down the ice while maintaining control over the detached ice. But finding an idea wasn't the same as knowing how to execute the solution, and that was where Quinn had a major setback. Even though Quinn knew about Transfiguration and Transmutation ideas, he failed to apply them to the snowflake icicle. The dense structure and frighteningly low internal temperature of the ice makes it extremely difficult to alter the state of matter. It makes it difficult for me to detach the ice from the snowflake. When Quinn detached the ice from the snowflake, the mechanism would wrestle Quinn for control, and in an instant, the snowflake icicle would be whole again. Quinn had spent a little over 3 weeks banging his head against the snowflake, thinking that if Quinn improved his mastery, then he would be able to get rid of the snowflake. But by the end of 3 weeks, Quinn had become better at changing the ice into water. He could change 3/4 of the snowflake into the water, but nothing really changed as it would turn back into ice. Things changed for the better when Quinn stopped being stupid. Quinn sat in the great hall for lunch, clutching his head in his hands and groaning. Brr, this sucks so bad, groaned Quinn. He was lamenting about making no actual progress. Even though he had gotten better at performing transmutation on ice, the mechanism would wrest control away from him. You look sad today. Quinn turned his head to see Penelope Clearwater staring down at him. I'm sad every day, I just don't have the energy to hide it today, quipped Quinn. Penelope quirked her brow and sat down beside him. Come on now, don't be like that. Tell me what's wrong with you. Quinn stared at Penelope for a moment before starting. I am having problems with something that I can't solve. No matter what I try, it doesn't work. He put his head on the table and groaned. It is driving me crazy. How about I take a look at it? Maybe I would be able to help you out, said the kind fifth-year Ravenclaw prefect with a cordial smile on her face. Quinn stared at her with his eyes narrowing and shook his head. Yeah. I don't think that is going to help. Penelope widened her eyes and said with a sarcastic smile, oh my, you are not sad, you are moody. She snorted and continued, I must say this is a new color on you. You are always smiling, so I thought it was your resting expression. Quinn sighed and apologized, sorry about that. The last few weeks have been tough. I was not trying to be a GIT. Don't worry. I didn't take any offense, Penelope assured and then gave some advice, and, if you don't think I can help, you can go to one of the professors. I am sure they would be able to help. Quinn perked up hearing that. He looked at Penelope and said, professors? I can ask the professors, can't I? He grinned and slapped the table, of course, I can do that. Quinn hadn't gone to a professor for help since he had come to Hogwarts, so somewhere in his head Quinn had excluded asking them for help. Plus, the nature of the vault was secretive, and he didn't want to lead any of the faculty members to the vault as it would lead to him being banned from accessing the icy vault, because of the danger. But, if I can just ask them for advice without revealing anything about the vault, then I can get some insight. Yeah, that would work, thought Quinn. Professors. They are masters of their craft. Of course, they would be able to help me, said Quinn as he got up from his spot. He turned to Penelope and said, Clearwater, expect a crate of butterbeer from me. You have done me great help. Penelope watched as Quinn ran out of the great hall. She shook her head. Sometimes, smart ones can be dumb, so dumb. Later that evening, Quinn stood in front of Minerva McGonagall's office on the first floor. With a look at his clothes, he straightened them out with magic. He looked at the lion's head protruding out of the door of the office and asked, I am here to see Professor McGonagall. The lion's head stared at him before the door opened, and Quinn entered the office. McGonagall's office is a small study. It had a large fireplace, windows overlooking the training grounds, and the Quidditch pitch. Back in her day, McGonagall had been the captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team. In her last game, she had suffered a concussion and some broken bones because of a Slytherin player's illegal move, and from that day forward, she had nursed an obsession to see the Slytherin house crushed at the Quidditch field. Despite her looks and attitude, Minerva McGonagall was a Quidditch fanatic. That's why she always spent every game besides the commentator. This was also the reason behind her pushing for Harry Potter to join the Quidditch team in his first year. She looked up from her desk and was surprised to see the person who entered her office. Mr. West, what a surprise. What can I help you with? She asked, gesturing to Quinn to sit down. Good evening, Professor. I would like to ask you for some help, Quinn said as he walked to the offered chair and sat down. McGonagall was once more surprised. Quinn West was the brightest student of his year, and based on his performance in homework assignments and tests, he was more knowledgeable than most of his direct seniors. Unlike most of his peers, Quinn never came to professors for any help, be it studies-related or anything else. I see, and I assume coming to me instead of Professor Flitwick is because you want some help with Transfiguration, asked McGonagall. Quinn nodded. Yes, I have a few questions about Transfiguration and about Transmutation. Quinn took a pause before he mentioned Transmutation. Hogwarts didn't teach Transmutation, and even though Transmutation and Transfiguration concepts crossed each other, and despite that, Hogwarts students still didn't know about Transmutation. Transmutation, said McGonagall, leaning forward, not expecting to hear it from Quinn. You are familiar with Transmutation, Mr. West? Quinn nodded and took out his fake wand, conjuring a log of wood with a proper wand movement, making sure that McGonagall believed he was using a real wand. With another wave, the piece of wood changed into a miniature eagle. My grandfather bought me a book while he was traveling, said Quinn, not telling her anything else. He didn't want to face any questions on it, so he continued, Today, I want to get some help with ice magic. Ice? She asked. McGonagall thought of something and asked, Mr. Quinn, didn't you fell into a cauldron of freezing potion? Quinn made a sour look. Yes, Professor. I was on bed rest for around 10 days. The professor folded her hands and said, Do tell, what do you want to know about ice? Quinn waved his wand and conjured a chunk of ice, and immediately levitated it so that it didn't McGonagall's desk. Now, when I turn the ice into water, with another wave, the ice chunk slowly turned into water. A little stream of water emerged from the ice chunk that traveled left and formed an increasing blob of water. Quinn made it slow for demonstrative purposes. The ice I am working is charmed such that anything detached from it would immediately turn back to ice and join the main structure. He waved his wand, and all the water rushed to the ice chunk and turned back into ice. Quinn didn't want to reveal the icy vault and the mechanism placed inside it, so he just made up a charmed ice scenario. He looked at McGonagall and asked, This is what I am trying to accomplish. The ice again turned into water, but this time the entirety of ice turned into water. And, with another swing of the wand, the water turned into a metal pipe. I want to transfigure the water into something else so that it won't go back to the ice, explained Quinn. How do I do that? McGonagall stared at the floating metal pipe, staying silent for a while before asking, Have you tried to take out small pieces of ice and individually transfiguring them till you go through the entire ice block? I have tried that, but the internal temperature of the ice is surprisingly low. He waved his hand in frustration. Targeting small chunks is met with extra resistance. Quinn didn't tell her that targeting small chunks prompted the mechanism to decrease the temperature of the ice more, making Quinn's job harder than it already was. I see, said McGonagall, putting down her quill that she had been holding till now. The problem that Quinn had put in front of her had now intrigued her. The conversion of water into ice is faster than the time you need to change the ice into water and in turn into another substance. Quinn nodded in reply. This was his current problem. How about changing ice into vapor and then transfiguring the vapor into another material, she offered. Quinn shook his head. No, I can't even change ice into water fast enough. Forget about changing ice into water and then water into vapor. Mr. West, I am not talking about changing ice into water into vapor. I am talking about changing ice directly into vapor, said McGonagall as she looked at Quinn. Quinn stared at the deputy headmistress of Hogwarts without blinking. He stood up from his chair and started pacing around the office. So, you are saying that I should skip the liquid state altogether? Asked Quinn. Yes, and do you know the reason behind this suggestion? Said McGonagall, trying to make Quinn think about the answer. Quinn stopped pacing and answered, gas is harder to control than liquid because the water is much loosely packed. The loosely packing arrangement makes it harder to spread magic and get every particle under control. And, asked McGonagall, I would have the initial control over the vapor because I am changing ice into vapor. That would give me a slight edge over the charm placed on the ice. My chances to transfigure the vapor into another substance would rise because of the increased time needed for the charm to work. McGonagall smiled. Exactly, and now you have the answer. But, how do I go from solid to gas without going through the liquid phase? Asked Quinn. It was the same problem as before. Quinn had the idea but lacked the execution. McGonagall took out her wand and waved it to form a massive chunk of ice, much larger than Quinn had conjured. Usually, to turn ice into water vapor, you would give the ice heat so that it would melt into water and the water would evaporate into vapor. Quinn watched as the ice floating above McGonagall's desk melted into water, and then the water started to boil, slowly turning into vapor. McGonagall was masterfully controlling the water vapor so that it would not leak around the room. But, you don't need to supply ice with heat to change its state. You can supply any kind of energy that can break the bonds between the particles. Magic can break the bonds holding the bonds that hold the ice together. The vapor turned into water, then into ice. The next moment, the ice poofed directly into water vapor. Quinn stared at the floating vapor, thinking about the implications of this knowledge. Cogs turned in his brain, speculating the plausibility of this method. It worked here on ordinary ice, but the snowflake icicle was anything but ordinary. That was some super ice. Thank you, Professor. I will try using this approach, said Quinn as he turned his eyes away from the cloud of vapor and looked at McGonagall. McGonagall saw Quinn wasn't paying attention to her and was lost in thought, so she decided to tell him to leave and don't disturb him. All right, you can leave, Mr. West. Have a good day. You too, Professor, said Quinn, blankly, as he walked out of the office. He came to himself, looked around, and found himself standing in front of the fifth-floor corridor wall that held the entrance to the icy corridor. How in the world did I get here? Said Quinn as he looked around. Well, whatever. Quinn placed his hand on the wall and channeled his magic into the wall, causing it to open. He walked inside to the icy corridor, and when he reached the end to the opening of the icy vault, Quinn slipped on the layers of thick snow clothing and charged his blood with blood magic before stepping into the vault region. Oh, this sucks as much as ever, said Quinn as he strolled to the snowflake icicle, feeling the cold. Quinn raised both of his hands to the snowflake and closed his eyes. He concentrated and focused his magic, channeling it to the snowflake, reaching every branch, and when it was enough, Quinn commanded his magic to break the bonds between the particles. His magic started work and filling the snowflake with energy, and just when Quinn felt that the ice was about to turn into water, Quinn pushed more magic into the ice. He opened his eyes and watched as the snowflake icicle vibrated violently before half of the icicle mass sizzled and turned into water vapor, and then saw it turn back into ice. But this time, it was a tad bit slower. Quinn raised his hands and yelled, "Ho ho!" It worked, it really worked. Quinn jumped up and down in front of the now whole snowflake. The result might not have been much different, but Quinn saw and felt the difference. It took more magic than his usual approach, but Quinn saw a lag in regeneration, and he also felt that if he worked hard, he could fight the mechanism for control. 2 months had passed since entering the icy vault had passed, and Quinn had made significant progress. Quinn could now convert all the ice into vapor. He was now working towards transfiguring the vapor into metal, in this case, magnesium. It was like a fight for control between the mechanism and Quinn, both sides trying to wrest control of the vapor, Quinn trying to transfigure it while the Volt mechanism was working to regenerate the snowflake icicle. Quinn retrieved a bottle from under the workstation and took a sip from it, but nothing came out as everything inside was frozen. He sighed and began heating the iced water inside. "Yep," said Quinn, with popping the P sound, "this place sucks." Chapter 39, Notes Publication. Around the same time Quinn started to dive into the icy vault, he was visited by a student at the AID office. He was working in the workspace when he heard the over-the-door chime ring, followed by a voice, "Is anyone here?" "Yeah, please wait. Take a seat." "I will be there in a moment," said Quinn as he removed his work gloves and leather apron. He waved his hand over his workstation, making sure that everything was packed and arranged for him when he returned. Quinn's clothes straightened them up as he walked towards the office door. When he entered the office, Quinn saw Padma Patil, a first-year Ravenclaw, sitting in the client chair. "Welcome to the AID office. How may I help you?" Quinn greeted her with a smile. Quinn sat down on his chair and asked, now that the standard greeting is out of the way. "What can I do for you, Ms. Patil? This is your first time here at my office." Quinn already knew the British girl with Indian heritage because they were in the same house, and Quinn was just a year older than her. He had frequent communication with most of the Ravenclaw first-year students. This year, Quinn had gained most of his business from the students from his own age and then from the new first years. Most older students still didn't treat Quinn's venture as a serious service because of Quinn's age. Why would they go to a second year who was still new to Hogwarts? This line of thought and the belief that they knew more than Quinn was why Quinn's AID wasn't popular among the older students. And Quinn had no intention to laud his actual knowledge and skills to the upperclassmen just so he could gain more business. Padma Patil looked at Quinn and straightforwardly said, "The final exams are coming in a few months, so I would like to have your first-year notes." "My notes?" asked Quinn. His expression was one of a mix of surprise and intrigue. "Yes, your notes. I have heard that you scored more than 100% on all subjects other than potions and history of magic. With your reputation, I think your notes would be a lot of help to me," answered the studious of the Patil twins. Quinn smiled and inquired, "And where did you learn this reputation of mine?" "Professor Sprout told us during her herbology lessons," answered Padma. Quinn nodded, though it slightly surprised him she didn't hear it from Professor Flitwick. "Charms, defense against the dark arts, transfiguration, potions, herbology, astronomy, and history of magic," listed Quinn. 7 first-year subjects, and you want notes on all these subjects?" Padma nodded. "I can arrange that. You will have my notes of all 7 first-year subjects in your hands in a week's worth of time," replied Quinn. "And how much will these notes cost me?" asked the Ravenclaw Patil. She had researched Quinn's service before coming to him. She knew he charged money for the help he provided, plus the card stated the terms themselves. Quinn did some quick math in his head and answered, 5 sickles a subject, that makes 35 sickles, so 2 galleons and 1 sickle. Padma nodded and left after saying goodbye. Quinn didn't move from his office chair for a long while, thinking about the job he had just taken. A great business opportunity has come to my doorstep. It would be a crime not to exploit this, wouldn't it, thought Quinn. I can sell my notes to the entire first and second-year student population, spoke Quinn. Quinn knew of his reputation for being the smartest of his class, and his notes would be a huge commodity for students preparing for their end-of-year examinations. I have to thank Padma. There are still months before the exams, and even Ravenclaws haven't started going into the preparation mode. I still have a lot of time to advertise this, said Quinn. If Padma Patil didn't come here, Quinn wouldn't have thought of this idea this year. But then there is that problem, sighed Quinn. While it sounded as easy as taking out his first-year notes and compiling them so anybody could read them, but the reality of it was rather different. His notes weren't just from Hogwarts, but from a boatload of different communities. They had a lot of viewpoints and information that wasn't taught in Hogwarts. I need to separate the Hogwarts material, said Quinn, rubbing his forehead. That would take some time. End-of-year exam notes had to be short and concise. Quinn's actual notes were short and concise, but on a different level, they weren't suitable for end-of-year examinations. Quinn's notes had information and knowledge from a boatload of various communities that would not help students in Hogwarts examinations. Plus, if these notes become popular, then they would most probably make their way to at least one of the teachers, sighed Quinn. Quinn needed to be very careful that something out of Hogwarts course books and Hogwarts library didn't make itself into his notes, because teachers might see it, and they might notice the oddities. Keep the cards close to the chest, all about that long-term game, murmured Quinn. He stood up from his desk and exhaled, this is going to be a busy week. Quinn stood in front of 49 stacked sheets of parchment paper, arranged neatly in the order of 7 by 7. A fountain pen laid on every sheet of parchment paper. He was standing in his workshop, and usually, there would be a center island table standing in the place of the stacks of paper, but that island table had been shrunk down and set on the side. Quinn sat down in front of the stacks of parchments, took in deep breaths, and closed his eyes. Quinn appeared in his mindscape and stood in front of 7 books. 7 books, set in a single shelf bookcase, in a room with nothing else inside. These 7 books were the essence of Quinn's knowledge of 7 Hogwarts subjects with information from Hogwarts course books and Hogwarts library. He had sorted these 7 books from his knowledge bank of charms, defense against the dark arts, transfiguration, potions, herbology, astronomy, and history of magic. He had carefully crafted these 7 memory books and made sure that there was no extra knowledge from foreign communities. The 7 memory books radiated with light, and when Quinn opened his eyes, all 49 of the fountain pens suddenly stood up straight and started to write on sheets of parchments. Quinn used every ounce of his occlumency mastery of the efficiency aspect to control 49 different objects, to perform complex tasks. Simultaneous multitasking was one of the occlumency skills Quinn was working on, and this was a great way to practice that skill. He allotted 7 stacks of parchments to every subject, and the pens wrote notes on the parchments. The fountain pens wrote paragraphs, drew complex diagrams, and referenced every point for extra information and validation if required. Little by little, Quinn got in the groove, and the pens began moving faster and faster. As the process became faster and faster, the sheets of parchment also changed quicker and quicker. Quinn's eyes were now only showing white as the 49 pens wrote, and wrote. After an unidentified amount of time, all the pens stopped and set themselves down on the few remaining sheets of parchments. Quinn's eyes still showed white for at least a minute before the irises came back down to the front of the eyes, and Quinn started to badly cough as he leaned down to his side with one hand supported his body and the other hand on his chest. The cough. This needs more work. Definitely needs more work, coughed Quinn. He lay down on the floor and breathed heavily as his chest raised up and down. He turned his head to the side and saw multiple stacks of parchments, more than the initial 49 stacks. There were hundreds of thin stacks of parchments lining the wide floor of Quinn's workshop. But it was worth it, he sighed, watching the sweet result of his work. He turned his head to look up at the ceiling and sighed, now, I have to do this once more for the second-year course. Quinn groaned as he got up from the floor and groaned because of the slight headache. He looked at the stacks and then at one of the tables on the side of the workshop, and thin post-it-sized slips flew to the hundreds of stacks. The thin post-it slips stuck to the stacks, and after all the parchment stacks were marked, with a snap of Quinn's finger, all the slips changed colors to one of the 7 rainbow colors, each representing one of the subjects. The marked stacks flew up in the air and arranged themselves into 7 neat stacks for 7 subjects. Quinn yawned as he walked out of the workshop, I need a quick nap. 3 days before the deadline he gave to Padma Patil, Quinn entered the Scrivenshaft's quill shop in Hogsmeade. The shop was owned by the West family, and as the name suggested, it was a stationery store. Quinn walked inside and approached the counter. He looked around and saw no one behind the counter. Looking down, he saw a bell, so he rang it and waited. I will be right there, heard Quinn from a back room. Quinn turned away from the counter and looked at the store. It was a simple store that sold rolls of parchments, quills, inks, notebooks, binding material, and all other kinds of charmed stationery material. Quinn noticed things in the store that screamed business strategy to him. The Scrivenshaft's quill shop catered to Hogwarts students, but with no Hogsmeade weekend nearby, they reduced the section dedicated to Hogwarts to a small corner, thought Quinn. He looked around the store and saw the current ambience of the store was catered to another audience. This seems more like a printing business rather than a stationery store. The majority of the store's adverts showed the different types of printing parchments, leather bindings, ink packages, charms the store offered that animated letters and drawings in books. Seeing the store being run dynamically to the demand made him smile. "Sorry for the wait. How may I help you?" heard Quinn, and when he turned, he saw a middle-aged man walking behind the counter, looking at some letters in his hands. When the person looked up and saw Quinn, he frowned. Are you a Hogwarts student?" asked the person. Quinn's looks showed that he was definitely over 11, so the shop employee was skeptical about seeing Quinn. But Quinn wasn't wearing a Hogwarts uniform, so the shop employee wasn't sure. Quinn smiled and walked towards the counter and said, "Yes, I am a Hogwarts student. My name is Quinn West. I was told that you would be expecting me." The shop owner's jaw dropped as he exclaimed, "West?" "Yes, you heard it correctly," replied Quinn, taking out multiple matchbox-sized stacks of parchment. "But I thought you would be owling the documents you needed to be printed. I never thought you would be coming here personally. There isn't a Hogsmeade weekend anywhere near, scratch that, today is a weekday." "How are you here?" spoke the employee, still feeling a little shock. "Let's not sweat the small stuff," said Quinn as he took out his fake wand and unshrunk the multiple stacks of parchment on the countertop and continued. "Now, take note as what I am about to say is important. There are 7 color strips, one of those strips mark every stack. This means that the stacks marked by the red strips go together." Quinn looked up and asked, "Are you with me?" The shop employee nodded, so Quinn continued. "Good, every strip is marked with a number, which denotes the order they go in while binding the pages. Every page also has a page number just in case the order gets messed up." Quinn continued to explain all the details of the print and binding he wanted. He stared at the shop employee and asked, "Would you be able to remember all of this?" The shop employee nodded. "Good, nevertheless, here you go." Quinn retrieved a couple of sheets of paper and handed it to the employee. "Everything I said is on the sheets, and there is even more like the design of the cover and the in-between cover pages." He tapped on the pages and insisted, "I want things done exactly according to these documents." The shop employee looked through the instructions and asked, "And how many copies do you want?" "For now, I want 20 copies of each final package, but please keep the print with you." "I will need more in the future," answered Quinn. Quinn also looked up and asked, "How much will all this cost?" "I can't take money from you," said the employee, his tone incredulous. Quinn shook his head and answered, "No, this is my personal endeavor. I will pay for this myself." When Quinn had contacted his family to ask for the services of the Scrivenshafts quill shop, his grandfather had outright told him he would have to pay from his own trust vault, and Quinn had no problem with it. Quinn's trust vault had a lot of money, compared to the capital Quinn used for buying beast parts, herbs, books, and other stuff. This bill would be relatively small, and he would most probably break even if a few sets sold. Profit was never really the motive, though Quinn. "I will send you the bill after the delivery," answered the shop employee. Quinn's family owned the business, and it wouldn't be a problem if Quinn never paid. "I will be needing these in 3 days. Would that time be enough?" asked Quinn. The shop employee nodded and responded, "You will have these in 2 days." He looked at Quinn and asked, "Would you come here to collect?" Quinn shook his head, "No, shrunk the notebooks and owl them to Hogwarts." "Understood." Quinn nodded, "Excellent. Now, I would have to leave. I have to return to the castle." The shop employee stepped from behind the counter and said, "I will escort you." Quinn waved his hand and said, "It's okay. I can find my way. By the way, I didn't get your name." "Oh, my name is Gary," answered the now-named shop employee. "Good evening, Gary. Let's hope this goes well and we can work more," said Quinn as he bid farewell to Gary. As Gary promised, Quinn got his delivery on the day he had to give the notes to Padma Potil. During breakfast, the owl raid brought the Scrivenshafts package dropped on the table in front of Quinn. Quinn saw the Scrivenshafts logo on the package, and a wide grin surfaced on his face. He picked the parcel and placed it in his book bag. He hummed a tune while eating his breakfast. Marcus, who was looking at Quinn, asked, "What got you in a good mood?" "Today will be a momentous day, Belby." "A momentous day," said Quinn. Quinn looked at Marcus, but he was already back eating his food, not paying attention to him. You just missed the footnote, you glutton, deadpanned Quinn. Quinn sat in his office reading a book on blood magic when he heard the door chime ring. He closed the book and looked up to see Padma Patil enter the office. "Good evening, Ms. Patil." "Your notes are ready," greeted Quinn. He opened a drawer in his desk and took out 7 bound stacks of parchments. The cover of each stack had a different color. The 7 books covered all 7 colors of the rainbow. The design on the cover was quite mentalistic. Mentioned in the center of the cover page were the subject names and the year. On the bottom right corner, there was a small box with a.i.d written inside it. The cover page was made from a slightly thicker parchment than the pages inside, but it was still parchment, so the notes had a paperback feel instead of a hardback. Quinn had the notes made from parchment instead of paper so that all would readily accept them. He pushed the 7 notebooks towards Padma and let her take a look. The looks of notes surprised her. She wasn't expecting them to look so aesthetically pleasing. "These are your notes?" she asked as she opened the charms notebook. "Yes, these are my notes, an amalgamation of my knowledge. These notes contain everything I consider important, written in easy words and figures. You will find everything from the course books and the books I have read from the library," said Quinn, not lying at all. He was just admitting that he knew a lot more than this. "Why do they look like this?" asked Padma, not looking at Quinn at all. The notebooks intrigued her too much. "Oh, that," Quinn smiled and said, "I have decided to sell these notes, so I made them look good. This design will attract a lot more attention." He leaned forward and spoke, "Now, Ms. Patil, I have a proposition that I would like to offer you." Padma looked up from the notes and asked, "What proposition?" "I would give you a discount of 10 sickles, or 2 of these 7 notebooks if you advertise these notes to your friends. Study in the common room. Keep the notes out on the tables, so they remain in view, and everyone can see them." "You know that kind of stuff," answered Quinn. Padma thought for a second before nodding, "I can do that." She put 25 sickles on the table. Quinn counted the money before asking, "Can you sign your name, the subjects you purchased, and the money you gave me on here?" He pulled out a paper from his desk with a table on it. "Write your name here, tick the subjects you purchased and write the amount in sickles." "Excellent." Quinn shook hands with Padma and said, "Pleasure doing business with you." When Padma left, Quinn looked at the sole name written on the table and talked, "Let's start phase 2. Chapter 40, Spreading Influence, and Important Customers. Katie Bell and her friends were walking in the corridors, walking back to their common room after classes, when they were stopped by a voice. "Bell." The Gryffindor chaser looked back to see Quinn West wave his hand as he weaved through a crowd of students. "Yeah, what is it?" asked Katie when the Ravenclaw walked near her. She saw Quinn put his hand into his book bag and take out a stack of notebooks. She could see the thin, colorful spines of the notebooks with the violet notebook on the top. "What are these?" she asked as Quinn handed them to her. Katie read the topmost violet notebook, Charms, Year 2. "Yup," said Quinn, popping the P at the end. "These are my examination notes for all 7 subjects for our year," smiled Quinn. Katie frowned and uttered, "But the exams aren't for another couple of months." Quinn nodded, replying to the Quidditch athlete, "True, but I am giving these to you because I am going to sell these notes from now on." He tapped the corner of the notebook, directing the attention of Katie and her friends to the words AID written in the box. "You can buy them at the AID office for 5 sickles a subject. No need to buy the entire set." He looked at Katie's 2 friends and raised his hand to show an AID card. He shifted his thumb to reveal that he had 2 cards in his hands, showcasing sleight of hand. "These are for you ladies," said Quinn as he gave the cards to them. "If you want to buy my notes, you can come to this room. As I said, you don't have to buy the complete set, and you can pool money among a group to buy the entire set and share the notebooks." He turned back to Katie and spoke, "This set is free. But I want you to do something for me." When Katie nodded, Quinn continued, "Spread the word that I am selling these notebooks among the Gryffindor house. I have notes for all subjects of the first. The price is negotiable." He placed his hand on top of the notebooks, and when he removed it, there was another black and gold AID card sitting on the top of the notebook. "I will discuss prices with them there," finished Quinn. Katie looked at the card sitting on top of the notebook. How many of these do you carry? Quinn waved his empty hand and shook it for another card to suddenly appear in his hand. He held the card with his other hand and revealed a whole deck of contacting cards in his hand, spreading them like a deck of playing cards. A lot of them, smirked Quinn, enjoying the look on their faces at the show of simple sleight-of-hand magic. Do this for me, will you? Remember, first and second year subjects only, and the prices are negotiable, said Quinn as he walked backward and waved them goodbye before disappearing among the students. Find a seed planted, thought Quinn. Megan Jones stood near the Hogwarts kitchen with a dozen. Ms. Jones, as per our agreement, I want you to take these flyers and stick them on the Hufflepuff notice board, entrances of both the girls' and boys' dormitories, and all the places you think these flyers would stick out, said Quinn. Megan Jones was Quinn's very first client. She had come with a simple task of fixing a gift from her mother. Quinn had fixed it without even blinking, and now he was cashing the favor. A simple task for a small favor that she owed. She nodded, showing her understanding. You just have to place these flyers on the surface, tap them with your wand while saying stick. I have charmed them to stick when you do that. No mess, no fuss, explained Quinn. Okay, I will do it, replied Megan. He waved her goodbye as she ran towards the Hufflepuff common room. Quinn didn't give anyone in Hufflepuff a free set because he didn't know any first-year and second-year students on a personal level, so he decided to use flyers for marketing the exam notes. He charmed the flyers with animation charms that really made them stand out and were catchy to look at. Heck, they even glow in the dark, thought Quinn. He waited for Megan to return to give him a confirmation, and after 10 minutes, she returned. I did it. I pasted all the flyers on the walls. Her face was a little red as she came running from the Hufflepuff common room. Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Jones, replied Quinn, smiling, hoping the flyers would garner some traction in Hufflepuff. As he was about to leave, Megan suddenly asked, will I be able to get your notes later when I start preparing for the exams? The exams were still a couple months away, and other than the majority of Ravenclaw students and some studious students in other houses, no one else had started studying. So, Megan didn't want to buy them now and wondered if they would be available later. Quinn grinned in reply. So, drop by when you are in need. He waved her goodbye and walked away thinking. Hufflepuff is a go. Daphne Greengrass and Tracy Davis sat under the shade of a tree, doing homework in peace. They were sitting on a checkered sheet, with all their things laying comfortably on the cloth. Tracy was thinking about an answer in her homework when a butterfly caught her attention. The butterfly was no ordinary. Tracy tugged on Daphne's clothes, getting her attention. What? Asked the blonde in annoyance. Tracy pointed at the butterfly and exclaimed, look. The butterfly changes color with every flap of its wing. Daphne frowned but followed Tracy's finger and saw a butterfly flapping its way towards the trunk of the tree they were sitting under. She noticed how with every flap, the butterfly's wings would change color. Turned their heads toward the trunk, following the butterfly as it moved upwards and eventually went behind the trunk of the tree. The girls waited for the butterfly to re-emerge, but it never came back. Oh, I should have followed it, whined Tracy. Daphne just shook her, but she too wanted to see the color-changing butterfly. When they turned back to the front, both noticed something completely unexpected. Eep, shrieked Daphne, shocked at the sudden scare she just felt. While Tracy didn't squeal, she too was shocked and had a hand on her chest, breathing deeply. The thing that scared them was actually a person. A person both were quite familiar with. Sitting in front of them was Quinn, sitting there like he had always been with them. He was reading Tracy's homework parchments. He looked up at Tracy and pointed at the parchment. Wormwood doesn't have a taproot but a fibrous root. We add wormwood to the draught of the living death because it eliminates the side effect. You missed it here. Both of them looked on as Quinn pointed at things in Tracy's homework with a smile. So, we learn that by drying the leaves of the nettle plant, we can get the desired effect and use it in the potion for a cure for boils. Neat. From Quinn and then threw a fresh roll of parchment in his face. Daphne followed and threw her own roll at Quinn. Pratt, thundered Tracy, glaring at Quinn. A new look on her usual smiling face. Oh, come on. It was an innocent joke. I didn't jump out to scare you and silently sat here helping you out, said Quinn, busting out his best innocent look. The two girls just gave a deadpan look to Quinn. How did you get here? I didn't see you walking, asked Daphne. Quinn smiled widely, took out his fake wand, and casted a spell. The girls saw Quinn's other hand disappeared from sight. A disillusionment charm to make myself invisible coupled with that butterfly to distract your attention was enough for me to sneak up on you, answered Quinn, conjuring two of the color-changing butterflies that fluttered around the two girls. He skipped the details that it wasn't a simple disillusionment charm but advanced light magic to make himself invisible, and erasing the surrounding sound. Magic with simple misdirection. Quite simple really, said Quinn. So, what brings you here? Asked Tracy, as she wrote everything Quinn had said about her homework. She might have been angry, but she was listening. While Daphne admired the butterfly that landed on her finger. Oh, I come bearing gifts for you too, said Quinn as he took out 2 sets of exam notes and handed one to each of them. I present to you my notes for all first-year subjects. They have everything you will need to pass your end-of-year examinations. Explained every topic in easy words with diagrams for explanations. Tips and tricks for practical usage. These notes have everything and will help you greatly for your end-of-year exams, explained Quinn, putting on his best salesman smile. The two Slytherin girls undid the binding on the notebook set, picked the first notebook from the stack, and started reading. Quinn patiently waited while the girls read the material in the notes. He looked at the grass on the ground and had a sudden urge to pull on it but abstained from doing it. After a while, Tracy spoke, "These are amazing. They have so much in so fewer words." She looked at Quinn and asked, "You wrote these?" Quinn smirked, "Of course, I did. And, I am going to sell these." He tapped on the AID symbol on the cover of the notes. "For that reason, I am going to need a little help." Quinn took out another set of flyers that he had given to Megan Jones and placed them on the picnic blanket. "In return for these notes, all I am asking from you two is a little promotion in the Slytherin house. You can post these flyers in the common room, and a little word of mouth would also be helpful." "I thought these were gifts," asked Daphne. Quinn chuckled and responded, "You can treat my request as a return gift from you too." Tracy picked up a flyer and said, "Of course, we will help. These notes are going to be a great help." "Thank you," smiled Quinn. He also handed them a few AID cards for distribution and explained everything about selling first and second-year subjects, and how the prices were negotiable. With this, Slytherin is locked in too. Quinn was going to do the promotion in Ravenclaw on his own, and he was absolutely sure that Ravenclaw students would be his first customers and most extensive buyers. "As long as I am top, Ravenclaw students will buy whatever I sell." It took a couple of days before the orders started pouring in, and as Quinn had expected, the first batch of orders were all from Ravenclaw students. The first one to visit his office was Terry Boot, first-year Ravenclaw. "I want to buy a complete set," asked the boy. "Are you sure? It will cost you 2 galleons and 1 sickle. It is a sizable amount." "Can you afford it?" asked Quinn, retrieving a set of notes from below his desk. Terry took out 1 galleon and the remaining amount in sickles and set them on the table. He looked pained as he did it. Quinn faintly smiled and placed 1 finger on the galleon and 1 sickle and slid them towards himself. "I am willing to give you a 50% discount if you just owe me a favor in the future. You just have to do some work for me in the future." "How about it?" asked Quinn. Terry, with no hesitation, said, "I will do it." He picked up the remaining sickles from the table and placed them back into his pocket. "Good," smiled Quinn. He took out the buyer's sheet and asked, "Sign your name here, tick under the subjects you took, which means tick under all of them, and finally, write the amount you paid. In your case, it is 17 sickles." Terry picked up the quill that Quinn offered and excitedly wrote on the buyer's sheet. Quinn pushed the note set towards Terry and smiled, "Thank you for doing business with me. I hope you will like the notes and come back next year." After Terry, the dam broke, and all of Ravenclaw's first-year and second-year students came running to the AID office for the exam note set. All of them asked for a 50% discount, and Quinn gladly gave them the deduction in return for a favor. Damn, all of them bought full sets, thought Quinn, smiling at the buyer's table. After the Ravenclaw wave came, two people, who Quinn had forgotten about, visited the AID office for the exam notes. Quinn was working in the workshop chime and walked to the office with a small glass vial in his hand. He was drying it with a cloth because he didn't want magical residue on the vial from using a drying spell. "Welcome to AID. How may I help you today?" greeted Quinn as he walked into the office with the vial and drying cloth in his hand. He had his eyes on the vial, and when he looked up, Quinn found two Gryffindor looking at him. Not any two Gryffindor, but Ivy Potter and Hermione Granger. Quinn was surprised, but didn't show a change in expression and calmly wrapped the vial in the drying cloth, and set it down on the ledge in the wall behind his desk. Sitting down on his chair, Quinn gestured both of them to sit down and spoke, "Please take a seat. Make yourselves comfortable." After the Gryffindor brunette and redhead sat down, Quinn asked, "Now, how may I help you too?" After the troll incident, Ivy and Hermione had gotten close. Now hung out together all the time and rarely could be seen away from each other. So, it wasn't a surprise that they came together. But damn, I forgot about these two because of the icy vault, thought Quinn as he waited for them to speak. Hermione took the lead and questioned, "We are here because we were told that you are selling exam notes for first-year subjects." Quinn put on his sales smile and answered, "You have heard correctly. I am selling exam notes for all first-year and second-year students." He took out a flyer and asked, "Have you seen these?" Quinn had given Katie the flyers to make her job a little easier. He also wanted to increase his footprint in the Gryffindor common room. When the time for the exams arrives, those flyers would still be there, and they will attract the eyes of panicking students. Hermione glanced at the flyer and nodded, "Yes, we have seen them." "Good, then you are familiar with the deal." "I sell the notes for 5 sickles a subject," explained Quinn. This was a great opportunity if he could have the Potter Princess and the future smartest witch of her age owe him a debt. "Let's not rush things," thought Quinn. He didn't outright say anything about the negotiability of the prices. And it seemed that the Ravenclaw students had dipped their toes in the Hogwarts rumor mill, and Ivy Potter had heard something. "What about the 50% discount that you have been handing out?" asked the redhead Potter. Quinn internally smiled, but on the outside, he shrugged and responded, "I give a 50% discount if you are willing to owe me a favor. In the future, you will have to do something for me to get this discount. As simple as that." Then he waited for them to either reject the offer or accept it. The answer came immediately. "No, thank you. We will pay in full," replied Ivy. She was the child of the Potter family. She knew better than to owe someone a favor for something so minor. Quinn shrugged. He felt a little disappointed, but there was nothing he could do about it. "So, are you going to buy the entire set, or do you want individual subjects?" "We want 2 entire sets," answered Hermione. Both girls took out 2 galleons and 1 sickle each and placed them on the table. Quinn took out 2 sets and slid them towards the girls. Picking up the coins off the table, Quinn said, "Please, sign your names here, tick the subjects and write the amount you gave." Giving them the buyer's sheet. He picked them coins and placed them in his pockets. After the two completed the form, Quinn said, "Thank you for doing business with me. If you have any problems that you need to get solved or want to gain any information, just come here, and I will help you out." Placing 2 AID cards in front of them. Hermione picked up the card and asked, "Any information, you say?" She looked at Quinn and asked, "Then tell me you are utilizing this room, but do you have permission for using it?" Quinn smiled and answered, 2 galleons, and I will give you the answer. 5 more galleons, and I will give you the proof." Hermione narrowed her eyes, scrutinizing Quinn for a while before shaking her head. "You are asking too much money for that information." Quinn smiled while shrugging, "The information is always available. Come whenever you think the price is acceptable." Ivy, who had been silent for a while, looked up and asked, "Do you know who Nicholas Flamel is?" "Ivy," hissed Hermione, not wanting to reveal that they had been looking for Nicholas Flamel, or they had been to the 3rd-floor corridor. If news leaked, they would be in deep trouble. Unknown to Hermione, Quinn had just heard all her fears through legilimency. He had activated the moment Hermione had asked him the question. He turned his eyes towards Ivy, but here he could only sense emotions and no thoughts or memories. She has decent shields, thought Quinn. If Quinn wanted to hear her thoughts, he would have to spend some time poking around her shields, finding a crack, and gain access, or he could force through the shields, but Ivy might feel a little pain, and that might tip her off. Right now, he had business to do. Of course, I know about Nicholas Flamel, answered Quinn, watching as both Ivy and Hermione snapped their heads towards Quinn. You do? Inquired Ivy. Quinn nodded and showed her 7 fingers. For the price of 7 galleons, the information would be yours. He leaned back in his chair, giving them time to think as he peered into Hermione's mind, getting a feel of her thoughts. She is worried, but wants to know about Nicholas Flamel. Oh my, the time she spent in the library looking for Flamel. Quinn turned his eyes towards Ivy and could sense that she wanted to proceed with Quinn's offer. After some whispering, Hermione sighed, and Ivy turned to Quinn and asked, I will pay, so tell me about Nicholas Flamel. Quinn stood up from his chair and said, excuse me for a couple of minutes. I would return with the information. He walked into the workshop, and the moment he was out of their sight, a wide grin appeared on his face. I got in, thought Quinn. If Quinn could provide them with the information, then it would create a positive impression and return if they have problems in the future. Quinn took out a sheet of paper and summoned a fountain pen. Quinn manipulated the fountain pen through magic to write every piece of information he could recall about Nicholas Flamel. He wrote about his personal history, schooling, achievement of being the only known creator of Philosopher's Stone and a Grandmaster in alchemy, and his connection with Albus Dumbledore. He mentioned everything that would point to them that a Philosopher's Stone was behind the door on the 3rd floor corridor. He took the sheet of paper and slipped it into an A4 size document envelope. Here you go, information on one Nicholas Flamel, said Quinn as he put the envelope in front of the 2 girls. Ivy tried to pick up the envelope, but the envelope didn't budge from the table. What is this? Demanded Ivy, a frown marring her face. Quinn took out a galleon from his pocket and said, pay up, and you will be able to pick it up. Ivy huffed while she retrieved 5 galleons from her pocket and looked at Hermione. Do you have 2? I will return them to you later. The girls pulled the money and gave it to Quinn, and Quinn tapped his fake wand on the envelope, releasing it from the table. Ivy swiped the envelope and hurriedly read the papers inside it. Hermione joined her, and both read the contents, their eyes widening as they realized what Fluffy the Cerberus was guarding. The 2 girls looked at each other, communicating with each other, and nodded. They stood up and looked at Quinn. Thank you for this, said Ivy, Hermione nodding in affirmation. Quinn stood up from his chair and said, I am glad that you like my services. Please do come back if you have other problems. He followed them to the door, and when they were out, Quinn spoke to them, Ms. Potter and Ms. Granger. The restricted part of the 3rd floor corridor is dangerous. The headmaster wasn't joking when he warned about a painful death. Both the girls turned back with wide eyes and saw Quinn with a mysterious smile on his face. What? Exclaimed Ivy, but the door was shut closed before she could finish. The 2 girls stood in shock as they looked at the closed door, not knowing what to feel about the unexpected warning from the person who had given them valuable information that they were looking for months. On the other side of the door, Quinn was grinning widely. Mysterious vibe established. Oh, that felt good. Yeah, that was perfect, thought Quinn, feeling great about his performance. This marks the end of part 10 of the story, Magical Journey in Harry Potter World. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.